If you drive a rig long enough, you learn to listen to the road. The asphalt sings a song, a hum of tires, wind, and distance. Interstates sing a fast, aggressive song. But the old roads, the two-lane blacktops that wind through the forgotten parts of America, they hum a different tune. A lonely, mournful one. My name is Jack, and I've been hauling freight across the Southwest for 30 years. I stick to the I-40 corridor mostly. It's safe, it's patrolled, and there are loves and flying J's every 50 miles. But last Tuesday, the I-40 betrayed me. A massive pileup outside of Flagstaff shut the whole highway down. 18-wheelers were backed up for 20 miles. My dispatcher, a guy named Mike who thinks GPS is a suggestion and sleep is a luxury, barked in my ear over the Bluetooth. Take the detour, Jack. Cut down to the old 66. It parallels the highway. You'll bypass the wreck and be in Kingman by sunset. I don't like the old road, Mike, I said, watching the heat wave shimmy off my hood. No cell service. No mechanics. You want the load bonus or not? Take the road. I sighed, popped a brake, and swung my Peterbilt onto the exit ramp. The transition was immediate. The smooth concrete of the interstate gave way to cracked, sun-bleached asphalt. The landscape shifted from generic highway scrub to the jagged, alien beauty of the Arizona high desert. Mesas rose up like red teeth against the purple sky. For the first hour, it was fine, just me and the hum of the engine. Then the wind picked up. It wasn't a breeze, it was a wall. A brown curtain of dust swept across the plain, blotting out the sun. The sky turned a bruised, ugly orange. My visibility dropped to 0. I downshifted, crawling along at 15 miles per H-hour, my headlights cutting pathetic cones into the swirling sand. And then the temperature gauge spiked. Ding, ding, ding. Come on, old girl, I whispered, tapping the dash. Don't do this, steam hissed from under the hood. The needle buried itself in the red. I had no choice. I had to pull over before I cracked the block. I spotted a break in the dust, a neon glow cutting through the brown haze like a lighthouse. A parking lot. I wrestled the rig off the road, gravel crunching under my tires, and hissed to a halt. The dust storm raged around me, but here, in the lee of a building, the air was clearer. I looked up at the sign buzzing above me. It was pristine neon, pink and electric blue, untouched by the desert sun. Sally's Infinite Eats open 24/7 and forever. Infinite Eats, I muttered, grabbing my flashlight and my jacket. Pretentious. I stepped out of the cab. The heat hit me like a physical blow, dry and dusty. But mixed with the smell of ozone and sand was something else. Cherry pie and grilled onions. It smelled incredible. I walked toward the diner. It was a classic gleaming chrome Airstream style building, straight out of a Norman Rockwell painting. The windows were clean. The chrome was polished, but it was the parking lot that made me stop. It was full. There were maybe 20 cars parked in neat rows, but there wasn't a single Toyota Camry or Ford F-150. There was a cherry red 57 Chevy Bel Air, a mint green 65 Mustang, a hulking wood paneled station wagon that looked like it belonged in a National Lampoon movie, a Trans Am with a Firebird on the hood that screamed 1979. Every single car looked brand new. The wax shone, the chrome sparkled. There wasn't a speck of dust on them, despite the storm raging 10 feet away. Car show, I reasoned, though my gut tightened. Must be a classic car club meeting. I walked past a beautiful baby blue Cadillac. I glanced inside. There was a half-eaten burger on the dashboard, a milkshake in the cup holder, and on the passenger seat, a newspaper, the Arizona Republic. Date, the 4th of October, 1955. The paper wasn't yellow. It was white, crisp, like it had been bought that morning. I shook my head. Props, I whispered. These guys really commit to the bit. I walked up the steps to the diner. The door was heavy glass with a silver handle. I reached for it and for a second, I hesitated. A static charge zapped my hand, sharper than usual inside. I could hear music. A jukebox playing a slow doo-wop song. Put your head on my shoulder. I pulled the handle. The door opened with a smooth suction sound, like opening an airlock. I stepped inside. The noise of the wind and the storm vanished instantly. I was standing in 1955 or 1970. Or 1980, it was hard to tell. The decor was a mashup of every era of Americana, fused into a perfect, timeless whole. Red vinyl booths, checkerboard floors, a counter that stretched the length of the room. And it was packed. Every booth was full. Every stool at the counter was taken, except one. But it was the silence that hit me first. Despite the music, despite the crowd, nobody was talking. There was no clinking of silverware, no chatter. Everyone was just sitting. A family of 4 in the first booth sat rigid, staring at their plates of pancakes. A couple in the back booth held hands, their eyes locked on each other, unblinking. A man in a trucker hat sat at the counter, a cigarette burning in the ashtray next to him. The ash was 3 inches long, defying gravity. "Honey, you're letting the heat out." The voice broke the trance. I looked toward the counter. A waitress stood there. She was impossibly tall, with hair teased into a beehive that defied physics. Her uniform was pink, her apron starched white. Her name tag read Sally. She was smiling. Her smile was wide. Too wide. It showed too many teeth. "Come on in, sugar," she said, patting the empty stool. "We've been saving this seat for you." I let the door close behind me. "For me?" I asked, my voice sounding loud in the quiet room. "For the driver," she said. "We always have a seat for the driver." She didn't blink. I walked to the stool. I sat down. The man next to me, the one with the cigarette, didn't look up. He was staring at a cup of coffee. I looked closer at him. His flannel shirt was faded. His skin was leathery, tanned from years of driving with the window down. But where his arm rested on the counter, the fabric of his shirt seemed to melt into the formica. It wasn't resting on the surface, it was fused to it. "Coffee?" Sally asked, pouring a steaming black liquid into a white mug before I could answer. "Thanks," I said. "I just need to use the phone." "My truck overheated," Sally laughed. It sounded like glass breaking. "Oh, hon," she said. "Nobody calls out from here, and nobody leaves until they've had the special." She slid a menu toward me. It was bound in heavy leather. It felt warm, like skin. I opened it. The first item read, "The 1974 pot roast. Ingredients: beef, carrots, regret." "The summer you left her. What is this place?" She leaned in, her perfume smelling of lavender and formaldehyde. "This is the stop," she whispered. "This is where the road ends, Jack." She knew my name. And then the man next to me spoke. He didn't move his mouth. The sound just vibrated out of his chest. "Don't eat the pie," he groaned. "The cherries, their eyes. Don't eat the pie." The man groaned again, his voice a dry rasp like tires on gravel. "The cherries, their eyes." I jerked back on my stool, almost knocking over the coffee Sally had poured. "Excuse me." The man didn't turn. He couldn't. His neck was rigid, the tendons straining against skin that looked like old parchment. But his eyes watery, terrified, and painfully human slid to the corner of his sockets to look at me. I said, he hissed through clenched teeth, "Don't order anything." Sally slammed a hand down on the counter. Whack. "Now, Earl," she chided, her voice dripping with that sickly sweet southern charm. "Don't be rude to the new guest. You know what happens when you're rude." Earl flinched. The cigarette in the ashtray next to him finally collapsed, the long ash disintegrating into gray dust. "Sorry, Sally," he whimpered. "Just making conversation." "Drink your coffee, Earl. It's getting cold." Earl lifted the mug. His hand shook violently. As he brought it to his lips, I saw it. His fingers weren't just holding the cup. They were part of the cup. The ceramic handle passed through his index finger. The skin had grown over the white porcelain, fusing flesh and dishware into a grotesque knot. He took a sip. He winced, tears welling in his eyes. "Is it hot?" I asked, stupidly. "It's always hot," Earl whispered. "It's been hot since 1982. I looked down at my own coffee. Steam rose from it in a perfect spiral. It smelled amazing rich, dark roast, but now, looking closer, the liquid seemed thick, oily, like crude oil mixed with blood. I pushed the cup away. "I'm not hungry," I said to Sally. "Look, I just need a mechanic, or a tow." Do you have a radio, CB? Sally ignored the question. She pulled a notepad from her apron. We have a lovely breakfast special today, she chirped. The memory lane pancakes. They taste like Sunday mornings before your dad started drinking. She winked. A chill went down my spine. My dad was an alcoholic. He died of liver failure in '99. How could she know that? I'm not hungry, I repeated, standing up. I'm going to go check on my truck. Sit down, sugar, Sally said. Her voice didn't change volume, but the command hit me like a physical weight. My knees buckled. I sat back down. The manager doesn't like it when people leave before they pay. I haven't ordered anything. You entered the establishment, she said, tapping the counter. That's a cover charge, a sit-down fee, a breathing tax. She laughed again, that tinkling broken glass sound. Relax, Jack. Enjoy the ambiance. I looked around the diner. Really looked this time. The customers weren't just eating, they were performing. In the booth behind me, the teenage couple I had seen earlier was still holding hands. The boy was wearing a varsity jacket from Kingman High, class of '64. The girl wore a poodle skirt. They were staring into each other's eyes with a look of intense romance. But the girl was crying, silent. Steady tears streamed down her face, ruining her makeup. She didn't blink. She didn't wipe them away. She just kept smiling that rictus grin of adoration. Under the table, I saw her foot. She was tapping it frantically against the floor. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, 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 SOS. I looked at the family of 4. The father was cutting a steak. He cut a piece, put it in his mouth, chewed, and swallowed. Then he cut the exact same piece again. The steak wasn't getting smaller. As soon as he swallowed, the meat regenerated on the plate, sizzling and steaming. He looked exhausted. His jaw clicked with every chew. They're stuck, I whispered to Earl. They're looping. We're not looping, Earl muttered. We're digesting, we're the cud. The diner is the cow, and we're the cud. How long have you been here? Earl's eyes darted to the newspaper fused to the table in front of him. The 14th of July, 1982. I came in for a slice of pie and a coffee, he said. My rig broke down just like yours. A sandstorm. I sat down. I ate the pie. He shuddered, and then the bill came. I couldn't pay it. Why? Was it expensive? It wasn't money, kid. The currency here. It's time you pay with hours. Then days, then years. He nodded toward the window. Look outside. I looked through the pristine glass, past the neon sign. I could see my truck. But it looked wrong. The red paint was faded to a dull pink. The tires were flat. The rubber rotted away. The chrome was rusted brown. That's my truck, I stammered. I just parked it 5 minutes ago. Time moves different in here, Earl said. Or maybe it doesn't move at all. Out there, 40 years might have passed, or 40 seconds. Depends on how much the manager is hungry. Who is the manager? As if on cue, the double doors to the kitchen swung open. Creak. The sound cut through the doo-wop music like a knife. The kitchen beyond was dark. Not just unlit, it was a void. A black, swirling emptiness that smelled of ozone and raw meat. From the darkness, a hand emerged. It was massive, pale, bloated, and wet. It placed a silver bell on the service window counter. Ding, order up. A voice boomed from the void. It sounded like a choir of drowning men. Sally perked up. Ooh, the fresh meat platter is ready. She sashayed to the window and picked up a large silver platter with a dome cover. She carried it to the booth with the crying teenage couple. She set it down. Compliments of the house, dears, she cooed. She lifted the lid. On the platter wasn't a roast or a burger. It was a human heart, still beating, and it had a tattoo on it. A small, faded anchor. I recognized that tattoo. It was on Earl's arm. I looked at Earl. He was clutching his chest, gasping silently, his face turning gray. Oh God, I whispered. That's you. It's the interest. Earl wheezed. I was late on my payment. Sally beamed at me. So, Jack, she said, pulling her pad back out. Are you ready to order, or shall we go straight to the chef's surprise? I stood up. I knocked my stool over. I'm leaving, I said now. I turned and ran for the door. I grabbed the silver handle. It wouldn't budge. It wasn't locked. It was welded shut. The glass was solid, impenetrable. Through the reflection, I saw Sally standing right behind me. She wasn't smiling anymore. Her jaw unhinged, dropping down to her chest. "You can't leave, Jack," she distorted. "The shift isn't over." I slammed my shoulder against the glass door. It felt like hitting a concrete wall. The glass didn't vibrate, didn't crack. It just absorbed the impact with a dull, heavy thud. Behind me, the jukebox stuttered. "Put your head on my, head on my, head on my." The record was skipping. I turned around, my back pressed against the door. The diner had changed. The warm, inviting glow was gone. The lights had dimmed to a sickly, jaundiced yellow. The shadows in the corners seemed to be stretching, reaching out like spilled ink. Sally stood in the middle of the room, her jaw still hanging unnaturally low, swaying slightly like a broken pendulum. The other patrons had stopped their pantomime. The family eating the regenerative steak had frozen mid-chew. The crying girl was staring right at me. Earl was slumped over the counter, clutching the hole in his chest where his heart used to be. "Sit down, Jack," Sally's voice gurgled, bypassing her mouth entirely and seeming to emanate from the walls themselves. "You're disrupting the ambiance. I'm not eating your people," I shouted, grabbing a napkin dispenser from the nearest table. It was heavy chrome, a weapon. "Open the door." "The door only opens for new customers," Sally said, her jaw snapping back into place with a wet click. She smiled again, but her eyes remained dead, black beads. "Or for those who settled their tab." She pointed a long manicured finger at the booth I had just vacated. "Sit. Read the menu. The manager is getting impatient." I looked at the kitchen doors. They were vibrating. Something massive was moving behind them, bumping against the wood. Thump. Thump. I needed a way out. The front door was sealed. The windows were likely the same. That left the kitchen. If there was a back door, a delivery entrance, a loading dock, it would be through there. But to get there, I had to go through Sally, and whatever the manager was. I took a step forward, brandishing the napkin dispenser. "I'm going through the kitchen," I warned. Sally laughed. "Nobody goes through the kitchen, sugar. You go into the kitchen, and you come out on a plate." She stepped aside, sweeping her arm in a mocking gesture of welcome. "Be my guest." I didn't trust her, but staying in the dining room felt like waiting in a slaughterhouse pen. I edged past her, keeping the table between us. She watched me, her head tracking my movement like an owl, rotating far past where a human neck should stop. I reached the swinging doors. The smell of ozone and raw meat was overpowering now. I took a breath. I kicked the doors open. I expected a kitchen. Grills, fryers, maybe a monstrous chef. Instead, I stepped into a corridor. It was long, narrow, and lined with white tiles that were slick with grease and blood. It looked more like a hospital hallway than a kitchen. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering violently. I walked down the hall. On either side were doors with small, reinforced glass windows. I looked into the first one. It was a pantry, but the shelves weren't stocked with cans. They were stocked with time. Rows of hourglasses sat on the shelves, but instead of sand, they were filled with crushed bone dust. Some were flowing fast, others slow. Each one had a name tag. Earl 1982, Mary 1955, the twins 1964, and on an empty shelf near the door, a new hourglass sat waiting. Jack 2023. It was empty, waiting to be filled. I backed away. "No," I whispered. "Not me." I continued down the hall. The screaming started. It was faint at first, coming from the end of the corridor, a high-pitched, mechanical whine mixed with human shrieks. I reached the end of the hall. It opened up into a massive cavernous room. This was the kitchen. It looked like a factory floor. Conveyor belts ran along the ceiling, carrying parts. Not car parts, human parts. Arms, legs, torsos all pale, clean, and wrapped in clear plastic. They moved along the belts, dropping into chutes labeled with menu items. Pot roast, 2-0, a chute swallowing a leg. Eternity burger, a grinder processing a torso. And manning the stations were the cooks. They weren't human. They were constructs made of kitchen appliances and flesh. One had a blender for a head. Another had knives for fingers. and in the center of the room supervising it all was the manager. It was a blob, a massive pulsating mound of grease, discarded food, and neon tubing. It sat on a throne made of old car seats. It didn't have a face, but it had a mouth, a giant vertical slit in its center that dripped black oil. It was holding something, a trucker. He was hanging upside down, suspended by chains. He was screaming. I looked closer. The trucker was wearing a red flannel shirt, jeans work boots. He had a scar on his chin from a bar fight in '98. It was me, or a version of me. The manager raised the cleaver, a rusted piece of a car fender, sharpened to a razor edge. It looked at the hanging jack. Then, slowly, its entire bulk rotated. It looked at me. Duplicate detected, the manager boomed. Its voice sounded like a semi-truck engine grinding gears. Paradox imminent, harvest the spare. The cook stopped working. Every knife hand, every blender head turned toward me. The hanging jack stopped screaming and looked at me. His eyes were wide, filled with a horrific recognition. Run, he screamed, Dak. Run. It's a loop. I tried the kitchen last time. It doesn't work. Run. The manager swung the cleaver, shunk. The hanging jack went silent. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I turned and sprinted back down the hallway. The cooks were slow, shambling, clanking things. But the manager was fast. I heard the squelch of grease and the heavy thud-thud-thud of its bulk pursuing me. The hallway seemed to stretch, the tiles elongating. I burst back through the swinging doors into the dining room. Sally was waiting. "Did you find what you were looking for?" she asked, blocking the exit. "Move," I shouted. "You haven't paid." I looked around for a weapon. My eyes landed on Earl. He was still slumped at the counter, but his cigarette lighter, an old Zippo, was sitting next to his fused hand. I grabbed it. "Fire," I muttered. "Grease burns." I flicked the Zippo open. "Hey, Sally," I yelled. She turned. "Orders up." I threw the lighter, not at her, at the jukebox. The machine was old, full of paper song labels and electrical wiring. The lighter hit the grill. The flame caught on a dusty paper label. Whoosh. It wasn't a normal fire. The jukebox flared with a blue spectral flame. The music stopped with a dying groan. "Put your head on my guy." The silence that followed was deafening. It wasn't a sound. It was the noise of a neon tube shattering. The patrons woke up. The family dropped their forks. The couple stopped crying. Earl sat up, gasping. "The song," Earl shouted. The song stopped. The blue fire spread. It jumped from the jukebox to the vinyl booth, then to the curtains, but it didn't burn the material. Where the fire touched, the pristine red vinyl turned gray, cracked, and crumbled into dust. The chrome rusted instantly. The shiny checkerboard floor peeled and rotted. The illusion was breaking. The time loop was burning. The manager burst through the kitchen doors, roaring in fury. But as the blue fire touched its grease body, the neon tubes inside it exploded. Out. I screamed to the patrons. "The door, it's aging. The glass is brittle now." I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a metal stool. I swung it at the glass door. Smash. The glass didn't just break. It disintegrated into sand. The wind from the desert storm outside howled in, mixing with the blue fire. "Go." I grabbed Earl by the shoulder. "Come on, Earl." He looked at his fused hand. He pulled. Reape. He tore himself free. He didn't care about the pain. We ran. The patrons scrambled over the booths, their pristine 50s clothes turning to rags as they crossed the threshold of the fire. I dove through the shattered door, tumbling onto the gravel parking lot. I rolled onto my back, coughing, shielding my eyes from the sandstorm. Behind me, the diner wasn't burning anymore. It was collapsing. The neon sign flickered and died. The chrome roof caved in. The walls turned to dust. In seconds, Sally's Infinite Eats wasn't a building anymore. It was a ruin, a pile of rusted metal and rotted wood that looked like it had been abandoned for 50 years. I lay there in the sand, listening to the wind howl. The scream of the manager was gone. The smell of cherry pie was gone. Just the smell of dust and old, dead things. I woke up to the sound of tapping. Tap, tap, tap. My eyes snapped open. I wasn't in the sand. I wasn't in the diner. I was in my truck. I was slumped over the steering wheel, my cheek pressed against the horn. Luckily, the air pressure must have been low, or it would have been blaring. The tapping was coming from the driver's side window. I sat up, gasping, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I looked out the window. A state trooper stood on the running board, peering in at me. His face was obscured by mirrored sunglasses. I rolled down the window. The air that rushed in was hot, dry, and smelled of asphalt. No cherry pie. No ozone. You okay in there, driver? The trooper asked, tipping his hat. You've been parked on the shoulder for a while. We got reports of a rig sitting dark. I blinked, looking around. I was parked on the side of Route 66. The sun was rising a brilliant, blinding orange over the eastern mazes. The sandstorm was gone. The sky was a perfect, cloudless blue. Ahead of me, about 50 yards down the road, stood a ruin. It was the skeletal remains of a building. The roof was collapsed. The walls were covered in decades of graffiti. The signpost was bent at a 45-degree angle, the neon tubing long since shattered and stripped away. You could barely make out the faded letters on the rusted metal. Sally's Eats. I broke down, I stammered, my voice raspy. Overheated dust storm, the trooper frowned. Dust storm? We haven't had a dust storm in a week. Clear skies all night, he looked at my dashboard. Engine looks cool, maybe just needed a nap. I looked at the temperature gauge. The needle sat perfectly in the middle. Normal? Yeah, I whispered. Must have been a dream, just tired. The trooper nodded, clearly thinking I was just another overworked hauler pushing his logbook too far. All right, well, get moving. You're blocking the view for the tourists. He gestured to a family in a minivan pulling over to take pictures of the ruin. He hopped down and walked back to his cruiser. I sat there for a long time, gripping the steering wheel. My hands were shaking. It was a dream, I told myself. Hallucination, highway hypnosis. Carbon monoxide leak in the cab. I reached into my pocket for my cigarettes. My fingers brushed against something paper. I froze. I pulled it out. It was a slip of green paper, carbon copy paper, the kind waitress pads used to use. It was crisp, new. It smelled faintly of lavender and formaldehyde. I unfolded it. Sally's Infinite eats guest. Jack date. Blank itemized bill. 1 times coffee. Black. $0 1 times insight. $0 1 times exit. Fee paid in full total. $0 and at the bottom, scrawled in elegant, cursive red ink, tip, your youth. Come back soon, sugar. We kept the seat warm. My blood ran cold. I flipped the sun visor down and looked in the vanity mirror. I stared. The face looking back at me was mine. But it was wrong. Yesterday my beard was salt and pepper, mostly black. Today it was stark white. The lines around my eyes were deeper, etched into my skin like canyons. My skin looked thinner papery. I hadn't just slept. I had aged. Earl had said the currency was time. I escaped, but I didn't leave for free. The fire I started, it burned the time loop, but the heat had to go somewhere. It went into me. I looked back at the ruin. For a split second, in the shadow of the collapsed doorway, I saw her, Sally. She wasn't the pristine waitress anymore. She was a desiccated husk, a mummy in a tattered pink uniform. But she was standing there, and she waved. One long bony finger curled in a come here motion. I slammed the truck into gear. I didn't wait for the air pressure to build. I floored it. The tires screamed as I peeled out onto the asphalt, leaving streaks of rubber on the historic Route 66. I didn't look back. I drove until I hit Kingman. Then I drove until I hit California. I don't take Route 66 anymore. I don't care how bad the traffic on the I-40 gets. I don't care if the highway is shut down for a week. I will sit in gridlock because I know what's waiting on the back roads. I know what 24 divided by 7 forever really means. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm driving through the desert and the radio static gets too loud, I can hear it faintly, under the noise of the engine. Put your head on my shoulder. And I check the mirror. just to make sure my hair hasn't turned any whiter.